Most people think that sports three-wheelers belong to an age of vintage Morgans or replicas of that famous Malvern buzz bomb. One company emerged in the early 90s to change all that. Grinnall set about designing a truly modern three-wheeler which would cash in on the deserted market which lay in this area. A professional stylist was hired, and this is the gorgeous result. Engine options encompass the BMW K Series bike engines, from the 90 brake horsepower 8-valve to the 16-valve 1200, producing 130 to 140 brake horsepower. With a dry weight of around 395 kilos, this all added up to a serious performance toy. Grinnall did concentrate on the turnkey market for a while, but now the Scorpion is available as a component package once more. And the best way to celebrate that is to jump in and drive the thing. But first, you're going to need one of these. Yoo-hoo! And you'll have to be driving like a complete maniac in order to go up on two wheels. Woo! Driving a three-wheeler is you're always going to get some smarmy people making some silly comments about a three-wheeler toppling over. Well, if you're going to drive a car as wild as this, I shouldn't let a few nasty comments like that put you off. And the best answer to give is when you speed off and leave them all trailing behind down your favourite country road. Another thing they'll hit you with is that a kit car will surely be very poor in quality. Well, this car needs no excuses making for it. The bodywork is smooth and very nicely put together. In fact, every component you can see looks immaculate. So let's forget the fact that it's a kit at all, shall we? Ha, I feel better now for getting it off my chest. Cheeky. One of the best features about this sports car is that it'll get you from A to B. You'll look very cool whilst you're doing it, but it's cheaper and more economical than any other sports car. And that's why I like it. This is definitely not a bargain basement motor, but you will be benefiting from an awful lot of research and development. Quality comparable to the Lotus Elise, and looks that will really get somebody's attention. And if you're still not convinced, the best is yet to come, because with its K1100 engine, it can do 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. It does a top speed of 130 miles an hour, and the best bit of all, you'll get 30 to 50 miles a gallon. The insurance is very reasonable, and you'll only have to pay motorcycle tax. But bearing all that, you'll still have to buy your own Mac. Be prepared to get nasty hair, and be prepared to get a soggy bottom. But apart from that, it's great. Love it. I'm going off to get one now.
With the Tiger rolling and the body just needing the odd finishing touch, it's now time to trim the very Spartan-looking interior. Neil, who's done a little of this sort of thing before, offered to help with all this and set to fitting the carpet. With the flat sections of the Cat interior, the carpet can't be much easier, but there are a few tips to make a professional-looking job. Spray adhesive is easy to get hold of. Your local material suppliers should have some, or you can order it by post from specialists who advertise in the kit press. Simple things like always cutting from a corner at 45 degrees. This means that any gaps will be a simple triangle to fill, using bits cut from gathered corners. Of course, getting right into the corners and edges will tidy up the finished car and allow carpets on top to settle comfortably. And of course, Richard gets to have a go.
Folds up panel, isn't it? Just make sure it's nice and tight in the corners. I think it'll need cutting on this side here. Unless you want to tuck it. Oh, you tuck it under there nicely. There you are. That's probably solid. And then basically you just need to shove that down the same as done this side. Like that. Is there enough glue there? Just.
The tunnel is the hardest bit to fit. We asked Neil to make the top from padded, ribbed vinyl. First of all, he lined up the back edge and marked up the positions for the handbrake lever and gear lever holes. Settling the tunnel trim so that it's square to the edges, it's time to spray glue the sides. It may seem like a laughing matter, but we're gluing outdoors to ensure proper ventilation. You can actually get quite a headache from this stuff, and it isn't a very pleasant experience. He may look like a hippie, but glue sniffing is definitely not in Neil's repertoire. Ahem. Now we come to the side panels. Done well, these can really set the car off. Having checked and trimmed back the plywood panels, which came with the kit, 1/4 inch foam is spray glued to the wood. Be careful not to over glue either, or it will soak through the foam and make it collapse under pressure. A light dusting is plenty. We're now ready to stretch over the vinyl. The easiest way is to lay the panel face down and draw around it. Brush contact adhesive 1/4 inch in from the top and about 3/4 of an inch from the ends. Yes, I know it sounds strange, but you'll make up for this when you stretch the vinyl. Glue a tab over one end and stretch to the other, then stretch any creases that appear. At corners, glue down a very narrow tab and pinch the access material. Make sure you pull tightly and you'll not see any marks on the other side. The same applies to the dash. Cover the main panel in the same way, but do not glue the holes through the material until the edges are finished. These will move when the cover is stretched. After doing the outside glue for the instruments, cut thin slices towards the edge, stopping a little further away from the edge than the thickness of the panel. That way, you see, when you pull them over, no little cuts will be seen. And in the end, it should look like this.
That looks smart.
Well, this was going to be my big, exciting day working for Kits and Cruising. Somebody had mentioned to me pilot, and I was imagining all manner of things, private flying lessons, going up in some old aeroplane, but it wasn't that at all. The pilot they were talking about is something just as nice, let me tell you. It's this wonderful machine here, owned by this man. This is Dave Cannon. Dave, hello to you. Great to see you. Tell me a little bit about the history of your pilot, because it's been with you quite some time, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been with me for, well, I think it must be approaching 12 years now. I originally bought it from Birmingham, and it'd been in that sort of area for some time. We reckon about 20 years. We know 8 years in an orchard and 12 years in a scrapyard. In fact, when I phoned the guy up and said, look, I'm coming for the car, he says, oh, we'll have to get in touch with the Forestry Commission.
What was that?
So, well, exactly, that was my question. I said, well, you know, why? He said, well, since we put it, there's a tree grown. So the first thing we had to do before we could even get the car out was pull a tree down, you know.
Wow.
And it looked really pretty good until you really got to it, and then you realise the wings had been welded on, the roof had rotted through, the chassis had rotted through, the boot lid had gone, the bonnet was, you know, you name it, it was in a pretty sad state.
All right, so to me it sounds as though you're starting really with absolutely nothing. I mean, was it you were going to use the original car just as a template to build what you've got here?
Essentially, yes. I mean, my friends, I kept buying so much sheet steel that all my mates were calling it the flat pack pilot. You know, you should have gone down to MFI and got it. You know, and
well, let's start from the bottom and let's go upwards then, because chassis. You said that the chassis had rotted. I mean, what have you done here? Have you just made a new chassis for it?
No, I still used the same chassis because that way I could keep the registration. But what I did, I put a lot of new steel where it had gone through, John. It was just remade, got a lot of stuff folded up, and then we welded it in. But then we also boxed the chassis to give it an extra bit of stiffness.
Well, you need that, don't you?
Yeah.
Because you've put in quite a big engine in here now.
Well, by some people's standards, it's still relatively small. I mean, it's a 327, which is, I think it's about 5.3, yeah, 5.3 litres.
Right. Well, Dave, it looks absolutely beautifully dressed here. Just run us through what have you done to the engine, because it is small block Chevrolet. Just go through it. What have you done? What bits are in it?
As I was saying earlier, it's 1966 vintage, and the wonderful thing about it was when I found it, I got it at the right money. I was a bit suspicious about it, took it apart and found that although it was that old, it had never actually been rebored, so I thought, well, that's handy. Got it rebored, crankshaft reground. It's now got a crane cam with Urson lifters. The cylinder heads have been reworked only slightly, it's nothing major. And got the pretty much the obligatory Holley 4-barrel carburettor.
Yeah.
Once all the machining work was done, I actually had it put together very nicely by a guy by the name of Martin Kelly. Martin's been around for a long, long time, and if he's put it together, it is right.
Yeah, and it absolutely looks superb. I mean, you were saying earlier on you don't intend to drag race it, but there is tons of power there, presumably.
On a scale, I would say there's exactly bundles of power.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's a good scale to go on. Let's have a look inside.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, inside looks absolutely beautiful, Dave. Is there much remains of the original Pilot in here?
No.
No, not a lot, quite obviously.
The Bakelite, yes, and the door surrounds, yeah, that's all original. Steering wheel is a Mountie, as it says there, but the actual centre and all this lot is all homebrew. That was machined up out of a big chunk of aluminium.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guide us through these. They look very unusual dials that we have on the front of the car here.
These two here are actually in the holes where the radio controls used to be.
Right.
This used to be a grill. We just machined that out, put some alley in there. This used to be the speedo and all that. We've tried to match that up with the grooves that were actually in the Bakelite.
And who's done all the work on the billet for you? Is it you or somebody else?
Well, a lot of it's cut out with a jigsaw. It looks like billet, but it's actually cut out with a jigsaw. And then this was cut by an old guy by the name of George with a milling machine. This bit was a bit of fun. The climate control. That was actually cut out with a jigsaw and a drill and a few other bits and pieces. And a guy by the name of Neil Melliard tried his hand at acid etching.
Really?
And he's done that. All this is just MDF, stuff like that.
Well, the rest of inside here looks absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's just guide me through all the other bits and pieces in here.
That's obviously Capri. These little 100-watt tweeters. Speakers underneath the dashboard, speakers underneath the seat. You can't actually see the stereo. The stereo's underneath here, and that little gizmo there is the pickup for the remote control.
Oh, right.
Because didn't want to put a dash, didn't want to sort of mess the dash up by actually putting the radio in there. So that's all remote control. Electric windows, only in the front, but they're picking up from Vauxhall tailgate buttons. So when the door closes, it actually transmits the power through into the door. The doors are a bit of a mishmash, because whilst on the outside they are V8 Pilot, on the inside they are Ford Escort.
Right.
That means that I can have a relatively old car, but with nice modern locks, anti-burst locks. So there's none of this. So if you go into a roundabout, as you throw a right, your mate chucks a left and he's out the other door.
Right.
So it's nice and secure.
Have you got power steering on here, Dave?
Absolutely.
You'd need it, wouldn't you, with all the weight at the front? Yeah.
That's right, yeah. It's just a joy to drive. I've been to Germany in it. That was a nice little trot out. I've also been to Sweden, and it just drives.
What sort of mileage to the gallon do you get out of this?
It's quite surprising. You can get something like about between 20 and 25. It just depends on how you're driving it, but it turns in good gas.
The other thing I'm just noticing as I'm sitting talking to you from this lowly elevation is that you've got a sunshine roof in the car. Now, my memory of these was that they used to come with a sort of a fabric insert in the roof.
That's right, it was a fabric insert. The fabric insert was quite interesting. I actually took it out of here and I was somewhat confused as I was taking it out because I kept finding chicken wire and it was supported on chicken wire. I then found out that there was a coax cable coming up the window post there. That was actually the aerial. Very, very clever. I mean, for those days, 1948, and you've sort of got a built-in aerial into the roof. The roof is now, the roof had rotted away. It was totally shot. The roof is now basically a 2.8i Capri roof.
Right.
What we did, we took the skin off it and welded it in, and whilst we were doing that, sort of just filled it in so that it's looks as if it was a factory. You could say it's a factory-fitted sunroof.
Well, by Fords anyway.
Yeah, well, only thing is this car was built in Dagenham and the sunroof was fitted in Cologne, but it's neither here nor there.
The rear lights look absolutely superb.
39 teardrops, almost de rigueur on rods these days. Slightly different in as much as they're sitting in these buckets. These were made by Rodline. They're fiberglass.
Right.
Normally they'd sit in flush, but what I've tried to do is to keep a beading similar to the beading around here, around that. The idea being that they won't fill up with water. Hopefully it will spill round. And the other benefit of setting them like that, one is they present themselves at a better angle to the vehicle behind me.
Right.
And being slightly recessed, they actually show up brighter.
Really?
Yeah.
Quite extraordinary.
Well, it's just a simple thing, but it's something you find out, in the years.
Let's come back to this bumper here, the colour-coded bumper, the lights in there, where have they come from?
They're the front indicators off of Mark II Golf. And I also found out that you can now get these clear lenses. And there's one of the young lads that's helped me with this car a bit. He's very much into the sort of max power type of thing, and he says, "Oh, you can get clear lenses for them now, Dave." So that's what's happened, you know.
Well, I mean, how do you put all these things together in your mind? Do you drive around and look at other cars and think, "Oh, that would be good for mine"?
Well, that's it. I mean, I've got too old to look at women, so I'm starting to look at cars, John.
Well, I can understand that.
Yeah.
So, oh dear. The graphics, etc., on the back are absolutely wonderful. I mean, the machine is called Porky Pilot. I mean, where did you get this wonderful feel for this little character on here?
The little character is actually done by Mandy. She's the wife of Neil Melliard. Neil is probably one of the top graphics guys in the country. He does a lot of the cars that you'll see out on the strip at Santa Pod. He does all the fancy artwork on that, and he's responsible for this lot. You know, I say to him, you know, I'll pull his leg and say, "You stop your kids crying on the back of my car," but I'm really pleased with it.
Absolutely super. It really does finish it off, doesn't it? Why Porky Pilot, Dave? Why?
Because it's fat. It's a fat car. There was a movement a few years ago. It was called the Fat Attack. A lot of the street rods were basically they were box kind of cars. They were the Model A's, Model B's, stuff like that. In America, there was a move towards the 1936 cars, which they would describe as fat. Because if you look at that, that is fat. I mean, this line here, coming round, it's layers, it's rolls of fat. And that's why they were calling them fat cars. It was the Fat Attack. Yeah? Fat. There was a T-shirt which had a pig running away, and there was a guy trying to put a V8 on its back, and it was called Putting the Squawk in the Pork. And I just loved it, and yeah, it's a fat car.
Well, look, what other ideas have you got for this machine? Because, I mean, it's been, what, 12 years in the making?
Yeah.
Got any other plans for Dave Cannon to do work to this machine?
Not really. I think this one is pretty much my swan song, if you like. I will be involved with other projects, but there's just so much gone into it, John. I think the wife might have something to say about it. I've only got room for one car. This is the one.
Well, sadly, it's time for us to go. Our Danni's trying to get us a lift now, so I better go. So join us next week for another Kits and Cruising. See ya!